Today, we're going to look at using dynamic data masking in Snowflake to handle this use case. Human resources has the following requirements around personally identifiable information, their employee salary data. And there are these four requirements. A regular employee is allowed to see his or her own data. A manager can see data related to his or her direct and indirect reports. And members of HR can see everybody's data except for other HR people. Members of finance can see data rolled up by department. Now, how can we implement this in Snowflake using dynamic data masking? And how can we also use this to implement role level security so that users can only see the records that they are authorized? Now, so we're going to walk through this demo and through these four different scripts. And this is inspired by this article, this blog by Vlad Valiev at Electronic Arts. And all of the code that is used here is at this GitHub. It will also be in the description of the video. And let's talk about a little bit about how column level security and dynamic data masking works in general, and then we'll get into building the demo. So of course you could read this on your own time. This is a Enterprise Edition feature. And let's just go straight to the pictures. So masking policy. So a policy admin is a role that can be created, and that can create an object in Snowflake called a masking policy, and with various policy conditions, and it creates a masking function. And so you can apply that masking policy and essentially alter a table and add that masking policy to various columns, or those could be at the view level as well, and so on and so forth. And so in this case, an authorized role like support, they could see all the PII that's unredacted. Whereas, let's say an analyst role would have whatever mask that you decide. So a common mask could be putting asterisks in place of the actual data, or to whatever you want. Now, obviously, this could get very advanced, but that's the basic use case. And this is just some example of using dynamic data masking. And of course, there's also external tokenization. So you want to have this data stored as encrypted, and that would be using some external functions. So let's go on a little more. Okay, so now there's a policy at the table only, as you can see here. So when the great thing about the benefit of this is that whatever is on it, if the user is using a view, accessing the view, it would automatically inherit the policy that was applied on the table. Now, if you created the policy at the view only, it would only be applied when using a view, but not on the table. And of course, there's also nested execution. So if there's a table here in view 1 and view 2, and there are 3 different policies applied, then just be aware that cascading mask can happen as well. So that is about the extent of the pictures. There's obviously more documentation. We get into the advanced use cases here. But let's get into building this demo. Okay, so we're gonna, in a high level overview, we're gonna run these setup scripts over here to create this, to build our basic baseline data. Then we're gonna go over to this mask demo script to actually start creating the mask. And then over here, we're gonna do some advanced stuff to do some role level security, which is just like a bonus thing that you can do on masks as well. Okay, so let's get into it. So first, this is all set up, so I'm gonna fly through this a little more. It's essentially just gonna use role-based access control. I'm gonna hit the Command Enter key on Mac. All right, and then we're gonna, John can demo all 4 roles. So we're just gonna grant all of these roles to my current user's name is John. So then we're gonna swap between these 4 or 5 different roles. And let's see what our other dependencies are. We're just gonna create a warehouse and any other objects. Create the database that we're gonna use. It's called PII demo, for personally identifiable information, with just 2 schemas, PII and non-PII data. And we like to future-proof things, so we're just going to select our future views in the schema non-PII. So let's grant some more permissions on our various objects that we created. So we're going to de-escalate from account admin back to sysadmin for that. It's always a good best practice. And let's create the sample table that we're going to store our data. This is, as you can see, this is the employees table. So some strings, some salaries, and these will likely be, this will be our PII data. So as you can see right here, we're just going to insert this PII data into the employees table with these values. So let's run that. And you see John manages the engineering team, and these three folks report up to John, and we are John in this case. So we'll get to see us as a manager and see how that applies. And of course, the HR team, they get to see everybody's data except for the HR team itself. So we're going to see some of those rules applied. And this is just a smoke test of that, just to make sure everything works. And this is the raw data that we're going to see. As you can see, department is engineering, and as you can see, John right here, employee ID, and how the various reports do. We're going to see this again. So now we've got the raw data. So what do we do here? We just created the rows, created the data and the various objects that we're going to need, and we created these 12 rows of data and employee data. So now we're going to see how we can start masking that data. So we're going to go to this, as you can see, it's just go in order, script 10, script 20, script 30, and then if you ever want to reset your demo, script 90 over here will reset. So pretty straightforward. Okay, so now let's just set our context, and then we're going to explain what we're going to see. So this is just setting our context over here. We're using this warehouse and that is database. So what are we going to see now in this script is PII, personally identifiable information, and we're going to create a dynamic data mask in the 4 different rows and how they will have the PII mask. Okay, so this is that PII that we just created earlier, that those with those 12 rows. So let's mask that data. Okay, so here's where we're actually going to create these reusable masks. So let me just run the first one and explain it. So it's creating the masking policy. That's the object in Snowflake, and that's the salary mask. Okay, so what is this saying? When we pass in a value, it's going to return a number. So we're going to pass in a value, that's a number, and it's going to return a number. Okay, so what it's saying is when invoke a row in row privacy admin, one of the rows we created, then return the value. Otherwise, return a null. And just a little point here, there's 2 types of context rows, which kind of say who you are. That's used commonly in masking policies. It's current row and invoker row. Current row is actually the more default row and the more basic and easier to understand. It's just whatever row you are, sysadmin, then do X, Y, or Z or whatever action. But invoker row is a little more advanced, and we're kind of going to the advanced use case here, which is just saying that the object that is used, I'm sure the definition is a little more complex than what I'm saying, but my understanding of it is the object, let's say it's a view of whoever created that invoker row. Let's say row the row that created the view was the row privacy admin, then that permission would essentially be inherited into invoker row. But I think once you see it in action, you understand it a little more, or read the documentation. Okay, but essentially just know that when invoker row, when you have this row, it's just going to be easier. Just gotta keep that in mind for now. But this advanced thing allows you to do some of the more advanced things that we're going to see in that row level security. Okay, so now we've got the SSN, the social security number mask as well. All right, so now we're going to apply the mask to the table. So what is this going to do? We're going to modify the employees, the salary column, and set it with a salary mask. And for the SSN column, we're going to set this mask. And of course, you can reuse these masking policies across various different tables. Okay, to secure your whole enterprise. All right, so now the PII is going to be masked even to the most powerful row. So now that we've applied that mask, any query that will be running against this table with the mask columns, as you can see, even when the most powerful row in Snowflake, they're going to see nulls for that salary, and just going to see the mask for the SSN. And of course, you could always put logging, and Snowflake has immutable logs if you wanted to make sure they don't try to backdoor their way into that as well. So there's this, or you could even use external tokenization where the data is stored encrypted if you want to make sure that your account admins don't have access to that data as well. Okay, so now let's keep going here. So we just see that the account admin does not even see what this data is. So, all the other rows should also not see it. So that's the masking effect. And now let's run it for this row privacy admin, which can see everything because the mask allows it to see all of that PII data. So with the authorized row, it's as if nothing has changed. Okay, so now let's get a little fancier, right? So if they report to me, I can see their data. So I just wanted to create a user-defined function, which just says if I pass in who I reports to it and the current user, then it'll return either true or false. So that's what this query is saying. All right, so I'm just going to create that. And so you're going to see it apply here. So I am John. My name is John right here, as you can see. And so user-defined function reports true. So as you can see, we're going to build up our view here. As you can see, John is true. So using that UDF, these three folks report to John, and that's why this reports true over here. Okay, so we're going to grant the usage of this function to the public. That means everyone in your account. And we're going to see this in play now. So here's a view that we create. And of course, this is a fancy way of doing data masking. You can keep it simpler with just the first way that we did it over here. But I'm showing you a more advanced way of doing it. Okay, so now we want to use this row privacy admin. And I want to, let me just run this and then I'll explain it. Okay, so what are we doing here? We're creating a view named mask employee info. And what is it saying? Now this is, remember I talked about current row? This is where we kind of combine current row and invoke a row for more advanced things. So if you wanted to, when you're just getting started with data masking, I recommend just using current row. It's very straightforward. So what this is saying is when the current row is in employee and current user is, I'm sure whatever your username is, then it will just give you back your own salary. And so when the current row is the manager and that person reports to you, which is what that user-defined function is that we just created, then you can also see their salary. When their role is in a HR rep and the department is not HR, so you cannot see your colleagues in the HR, but you can see everybody else's salary, let's say in engineering or other departments, then that's fine as well. And if you're a role privacy admin, let's say you were, head of HR or something like that, then you can just see everybody's. Okay. So when your case and then that would also be applied for the SSN. So you see the various functions. This was for the salary and for the social security number as well. Okay. So that was created. Let's grant this view now to everybody. And all right, so now the moment of truth. Here's where we're going to meet the requirements. Remember the first requirement. A regular employee is allowed to see only her own data. So we're going to now simulate our row as the role employee row. And when we run this, we're going to see our salary of 200,000. So we're going to see our own salary, which is great. Always get to see your own salary. And now a manager can see data related to her direct and also your indirect report. So let's just run this for the role manager. And of course, we are John, as you can see by the username here. And these three folks, and including John himself, well, here, John, the folks that report to John, you can see all of their salary right here. But as I said, we're always keeping mask, so that's pretty much straightforward. But the salary is going to be exposed for the employees that roll up to you. Okay, so now members of HR can see everybody's data except the data about every other HR people. So as you can see, engineering, marketing, you can see all of their salaries, but you cannot see the other folks in HR. Okay, and now the role privacy admin can see all of the data, so of course they get to see everything. Okay, so, and the final use case, okay, so use case 5 is members of finance can see data rolled up by department. So we're just going to create a view that rolls up the data. So let's just create that view, and we're going to grant. Okay, so remember, we created this view of sysadmin, which is like a generally best practice, and now we want the role privacy admin to execute a view and apply the policy using invoke a role. And then we're going to use revoke current grants here, which was essentially change the ownership to role privacy admin and prevent sysadmin from having authorized access to this. Okay, so we're going to do that. And so we're going to grant select to the role finance team. Okay, so now we switch to role finance, and ta-da, they can see the salaries summed up by department over there. Okay, let's kind of like do some admin stuff and then do a quick recap. So here we're gonna use the role sysadmin, use the schema. So just want to show you that you could always run the show policies, like the show masking policies, to get the various info, and you can also describe masking policy and pass in the salary mask or whatever your mask is, and of course you get to see what's inside. So in case you start building up your mask, or if somebody's already created a mask, great, I'd love to apply that to column A in table B or whatever you want to do. And of course you can always see where the policy has been applied. Over here, as you can see, the salary mask has been applied on this table and on that column. All right, so let's do a quick recap over here. We have some PII data in the employees table with some salary and SSN PII. We created the dynamic data mask, and then we applied it to the employees table, and we saw in the 4 different rows and how they have the PII masked. Okay, now I want to get into some extra credit stuff. So we're basically pretty much done. We've already met the requirements. But what I want to do is just get a little fancy now, and let me show you how it's going to work. So let's go back to our role here for a role employee, and we're going to use this view. And as you can see, let's say you have a use case where you don't want to, essentially you only want to show the rows that are not null. So the easiest way to do that, and let me just show you what a manager sees. So the employee would only see one row, and then the manager would see only their record. And the use case for that, obviously there's multiple ways to do role level security. But in our case, we just want to keep it simple. We already have this infrastructure in place, this code in place with the, obviously declared what salary is null. So if we wanted to, let's say we also wanted to hide this other data in terms of like John and these other 8 records, the other 9 records here, and we just wanted to show these 3 records up here, how could we do that? Well, let's find out in this script 30, okay? So now we're just gonna, this one's a short skip, so bear with me. I know we've spent a lot of time. So we want to provide role level security. So in the mask with invoker role, the owner of the view that calls the policy will be used. We kind of talked about that a little. And the current role is who is connected right now, regardless of the view owner. And again, please go to the documentation because I'm sure they explain it better than me. And we are essentially using the view that we just created earlier, vmask employee info, as a security mapping table. Okay, let's get to the code, and I think it'll be better to explain. We're going to use our powerful role privacy admin role. Okay, and what do we want to do here is we want to create this secure view with a suffix called RLS, which is role level security. And that's just my naming convention here. And essentially, this is the important point right here. It's essentially taking that role that we created earlier, and we're just going to say where the salary is not null. So essentially, we want to filter out the nulls. So this is one of the benefits here is if you already have some mass data, it's easy to build additional kind of like business logic and business use case. And in our case, we're actually building a role level security on top of what we built earlier. So we're going to just run that. And now we're going to run grant select, okay, so that everybody can see this to the public. Okay, so now, as you can see, we're at the end of our demo, so thanks for bearing with me. We're going to see role level security, so only see the data that they can see that's unmasked, okay? So we're going to change our role to the role employee. We're going to grant, as you can see, ta-da, you only see the one row. For John, I only see my row. All right, and of course that could be used for websites, or that could use for any other type of information. As you can see, it's the Snowflake context rows are kicking in. We're going to use the role manager, and we should only see our 3 rows. And yes, sure enough, we only see our 3 rows. And the HR rep, let's see what they can see. They can see everybody except for HR, so engineering and marketing. They can see that data. And of course, for the HR rep, I'm sorry, we already did this. Sorry, let's go to the role privacy admin, the very powerful one. And of course, they can see everything right there. Okay, so let's just do a quick recap and then we'll wrap it up. Okay, so we create a second view on top of the view where the mask is applied. And that view only shows where the salary is not null. So it essentially gives us role level security as well. And so some of the use cases in various industries, let's say in financial services, portfolio managers can only see their data, and that's generally a best practice in the financial services industry. And in healthcare, doctors can only see their patients. Okay, and that wraps it up. So quick level summary on what we did today. We showed dynamic data masking with these 4 scripts. With these 3 scripts generally, and of course there's a reset script. If you ever want to drop everything and recreate the demo, you could do that on your own. And we essentially just took all of this data to answer this human resources use case, and saw how a regular employee is allowed to see his or her own data. A manager can see data related to his or her direct and indirect reports. Members of HR can see everybody's data. It's other HR people. And members of finance can see data rolled up by department. And we saw how to implement that using dynamic data masking. So as you can see, pretty straightforward to do. You create it once and it generally just works going forward, and you can build other objects on top of that and have cascading masks and do various other user permissions on top of that. We also saw how you can use that to implement role level security pretty easily just by creating another view on top of previously masked data. So it's kind of, you're able to use the don't repeat yourself methodology when you're Snowflake development as well. So as you can see, very great way to secure your data and to make sure you're meeting various regulations. Thank you very much.